there's no shortage of tactics out there, how to, step by step. So why are people still stuck? Why aren't they achieving what it is they set out to? Why aren't they living their best lives? And it's because something else is holding them back. And it's a belief system. It's a mindset challenge. And so what we have to do is we have to solve that before they can have the solution. I was coached by my former business coach for 13 years. And what he told me was, you have this rare ability to hear a new idea and just do it. And that shocked me because I'm like, why is that special? Because he's like, when I coach people, and I coach lots of people, sometimes it takes a year of us talking about it before they'll make one change. Why would someone hire you not to do what you say? And he said in a very kind and empathetic way, he says, Chris, people just don't work that way. People aren't ready to make the kind of changes the way that you are. And so I know when I'm told to do something, I'm just going to do it. I don't want to spend a lot of time mulling it over. But what I forget then is a lot of people are a different way than the way that I am.
Yes.
So I can give you advice on how to make more money. And I always wondered this because when we make a video, the same literal video goes out onto the internet and is seen by a bunch of different people. And the result vary incredibly. Like from somebody who hates me, who calls me a scammer, to someone who's like, I just made $100,000 off you. Why is it somebody gets something different from it? It's because their mindset is different. Their willingness to try something that they don't fully comprehend, to put it into action, is the key differentiator. We always say action is the biggest predictor of outcomes. So a person who's willing to take action, I would be willing to bet almost always will beat the person who's like, let me think about this a little bit more.
Yeah.
How was your trip to Vietnam?
It's freaking awesome. There's a lot to take in.
Yeah, I bet.
Some emotional moments, a couple flare-ups with the family.
Back.
All vacations have those kinds of moments, I think.
Sure.
Yeah. But what was really incredible for me is the amount of capitalism and entrepreneurship that exists, especially in Saigon, that the few people that I met already running at the top of their circles, and they're relatively young and they're super well connected. So when you know one, you kind of know them all. So I'm looking forward to return later this year to do some business.
Oh, that's great. Were you able to go to where your family's from?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes. Not literally like where my dad grew up, because my daddy can't
Right.
even find it himself. And he's tried a couple of times because the city has changed so much.
Sure.
But we got to hit the important parts and to visit some relatives who stayed behind. So I think that was an important thing.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, I have to ask, I've always wondered, now I have the opportunity, what inspires the tape across is that just a subtle design choice? What is that? It kind of goes well with our vibe, subtle art, not yelling, kind of have the tape over our mouths. So what's the...
Yes.
What?
So here's the story behind this cap, right? When I was traveling through Europe, half my luggage was stolen. And the important parts of my luggage were stolen. Basically, I didn't have underwear, I didn't have toothbrush, I didn't have a whole lot of things. So once I got resettled in Barcelona, I had to go shopping, and I don't have my hat. I don't have anything. I've lost everything that was important from a clothing point of view. So we went shopping. And so I went to this store called D Squared, which is this brand right here, D Squared. And they have this thing called Icon. And there are these two fun Italian brothers who I think are Italian Canadian. And they have Icon everywhere, on their shirt, on the crotch of their pants, everywhere. It's like Icon everything. And I'm like, I don't think I can wear that. It seems a little too much. I didn't know that much about their brand at that point. This is the only hat that had the tape already pre-built into it. So I'm like, I think that's one I need to buy. It's the only one that didn't have the Icon bold and up front. So it's not even something I modified. I was just attracted to it.
Oh, that's cool.
Awesome.
I like that.
Yeah.
So do you do that to all your hats now?
Now that it's created a little bit of a conversation, I'm like, I need to modify things. So it's something to think about. Yeah.
It is something to think about. That's kind of cool. Well, and it would make sense to me. I mean, obviously you started your career in design. And I remember reading something about you always kind of having that entrepreneurial sense like you wanted to do something. But I do wonder, you, as far as I know, you went to art school. You went to school for design.
Yes.
What inspired you to do that? I mean, a lot of times when you're looking at where do I want to go to college and what do I want to study, there's a really small percentage of students who actually know what they want to go to school for. How did that happen for you?
I think it was serendipity that things worked out for me because my older brother, who's 4 years older than I am, he is a computer science guy, super bright, and he wound up going to Stanford Graduate School, computer science, software engineer kind of person. I thought, oh, we'll just do what my older brother does, but I don't have the brains, the aptitude, and the work ethic. So I'm like, shoot. So when I applied to universities, I didn't get into a single university I applied to. So I'm sitting there in my senior year thinking, what the heck am I going to do? And in Asian families, especially if you're a first generation immigrant, to go to community college is like to bring shame upon the family.
Sure.
It's a big deal. It's like a purgatory. Kids go there and they never return. And to do like a trade would be like a horrific kind of stain on the whole family reputation. And it's in high school that I got this job working at a silk screening place. And I was fascinated by like design and printing. I just didn't know anything about how that process was done. So it was just pure dumb luck that somebody recommended me to go and work there. And that's where I met a real life graphic designer working and running a company and being an entrepreneur that I was thinking, I didn't know this was the thing you could do to make a living. It wasn't even within the wheelhouse of what was possible.
Yeah.
And so from that, my boss, his name is Brad Shaboya. He's like a stocky guy with a like thick mustache, played rugby, like a broken nose kind of thing, really deep voice. He's like, hey, where are you going to go to school? I'm like, I don't know. I think I'm going to go to art school. He goes, well, you need to go to Art Center. That's where you go. I'm like, where is this generic sounding school? He's like, Los Angeles. He could have said RISD. He could have said CC, California College of the Arts, CCA,
Right.
and I would have gone there. But he just happened to say Art Center in LA. That's where I went.
Because that's what you
fantastic. Yeah.
That's what I did.
Well,
I'm good at following orders, man.
That's fantastic. And then did you, when you got out of school, did you work? I can't remember. Did you work for somebody else for a while?
Yes, for a very brief period of time.
Yeah.
So I had, I think, 2 legitimate jobs before I started my own company. So when I was a senior, I got a job offer to work at an ad agency. I was kind of burnt out on school. So I took a break from school and I went to work at Cole & Weber in Seattle. And I thought for a period, this is where I'm going to be. I'm going to become an ad man. And finished up school and they're flying me back and forth from Seattle to LA, which was pretty wild as a 20-some-year-old kid who didn't grow up with much. It's like, how is this even possible that I have 2 apartments, one I pay for, one they pay for, and I'm flying back and forth and I have an expense account and I'm working on these big accounts. It's like, this is crazy cool. But then ultimately, while I was finishing up school, it didn't feel right for me. So I quit, finished school, and then got a job at Epitaph Records, which was where a designer that I admired a lot who graduated before me, he was working. So I just followed him. Again, it wasn't about the record company. It was just, I wanted to follow him and the way he thought about design.
How long were you at Epitaph?
I want to say like 3 months before I quit. Because tragically,
So a really long time.
yeah, tragically he was fired. So
well,
I was like,
and look, really you saved yourself because the record business is not, you don't want to be in the record business.
well,
So,
there's the record business and then there's Epitaph, the punk rock record business.
yeah, sure.
I mean, I don't want to start any rumors, but there was a lot of drug use, people chain smoking. I was upstairs and every day I'd go home from work. My eyes were like just dry. My skin was like not feeling great because everyone was just chain smoking downstairs and up in the loft. It was going straight up there.
That sounds like the record business. Anyway, so you start your own company. Was it just you when you started?
It was. And there's a complicated history here. So I was freelancing at a couple different companies and I got a call out of the blue from my uncle. And he's like, hey, I have a business partner. We're thinking about investing in a design company. Is this something you want to do? I've always remembered you being very entrepreneurial as a child. I was like, you had me at hello. Let's go. So he's like, hey, what you need to do is write up a business plan and we'll have a meeting. We're going to be in LA in like a week and a half, and let's have a conversation. So we met up at the Westin Bonaventure for dinner, and I had scraped together a business plan. I didn't even know what a business plan was. I called one of my former roommates. His father's an investment banker, and I asked him over a phone call, what do I need to put in a business plan? And then you get on to your Macintosh computer and you start making it look right with 3 years worth of financial projections based on zero financial data that you have, right? And so over the course of dinner, he thumbs through this business plan that I worked on for like 48 hours. It was like, I was just delirious because I was so tired. And he reaches into his coat pocket and writes me a check for $5,000. Says that this is a good faith gesture. We're going to do business together. And again, just keep in mind, I'm like 22 years old. I just finished school. I've only been out of school for a couple of months. And I'm already in business with somebody who's going to invest $100,000 in me, having zero track record. And
Wow.
$5,000 back then was just like the largest check I've ever seen in my life.
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
I basically worked for like $30 an hour on odd and end jobs. So this was a big
Yeah.
deal. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so you managed to translate that $5,000 check into a company that's been around for a really long time.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I'm really interested in, and I know that, we talk about this with a lot of people we have as guests, because you start a company, you're by yourself, you're doing your own thing, and you build that to a point where you can no longer do it by yourself, right?
Yes.
And that transition can be really, really challenging. Would you mind, like, just talking about that a little bit? How, kind of what point you got to where you realized, okay, I can't do this by myself anymore. And then how you managed to transition into having a team or people working with you.
Sure.
And the decision too of like, because that is a choice ultimately. You get to
Yeah,
decide
sure.
if
You
you
could
want to
stay
grow
small
or,
and yeah.
and what
Yeah.
what was that conversation like?
That conversation was really easy and it happened almost instantly. I know people are like, what, wait, how did this work out? I think before I was a designer, I was an entrepreneur. And before I was an entrepreneur, I think I was a teacher. So let me work through that. So when I got this money to start a business, I just said, I'm in business. And so the people that I had freelanced with and the person who previously I was employed with now know that I'm in business for myself. So they would just give me work. So instantly I was thinking, I don't want to do all this work by myself. Who do I know who I can rope into this and collude with, and let's just do the work together, because I'd rather share the stress and the reward. That made a lot of sense to me as a 22-year-old kid. So I called up my former roommate who had dropped out of school already. And I was like, what are you doing, man? I have some work. Do you want to do this? He goes, yeah. So he shows up the next day. So I'm thinking the timeline here is weeks into starting a business. I'm already working with someone because I just don't want to do the work. And I can't remember, aside from me freelancing at a company's place of business, where I actually didn't call someone else to help me do the work. It was just from the beginning, and there was no problem for me whatsoever. Because let's take, for example, I was working at a place called Novacom. And Novacom was one of the hottest broadcast design shops in the country, if not the world at that time. And they had some amazing superstar talent there. So when I left Novacom as a freelancer to start my own business, Lewis Hall called me up. He's one of the creative directors. He said, hey, we need some logo design exploration work for this German network. And here's the name. Can I see some ideas in a couple of days? I'm like, sure, no problem. So of course, then I turned to my former roommate and was like, hey, here's the assignment. Let's get going on this. Why don't you work on this? I got some other stuff I need to be doing too. So I'm juggling multiple things at this point. And he would work on it and show me periodically throughout the day. I'd just give him some critique. And at the end of the day, before I had to send over the work, I would polish it up, clean it up, or have him revise whatever I didn't like, so that it felt like it all came from one person.
Yes.
And no one was the wiser. We'd send in the work, it was approved or whatever, and I just kept getting more and more work to a certain point where he couldn't do this work anymore. It was beyond his level of his talent. He just couldn't do it anymore. He was stressed out. So I brought in more friends and classmates of mine to help me. So within the first year, I think we had 3 or 4 people who were just working for me.
Wow. it also feels like, and I think you said this in a different way, that, before you were a designer, you were an entrepreneur. Before that, you were a teacher. There seems to be a natural mindset that you kind of have, that you just have, that allows you to not only have these opportunities, but to show up, but to just sort of naturally move through them. You realize that not everybody has that.
I'll have to take your word for it. I don't know. I only know how my brain works, right?
Miles and I don't always do very well with discipline, consistency, and grinding our way through the creative process.
We're also tripped up with things like overwhelm, imposter syndrome, perfectionism, and lone wolf syndrome on a weekly basis, and it's not a good feeling.
So a couple of years ago, we created The Box to solve our own problem. The Box is a container and community for creatives to stay accountable, do the work, and actually finish what they started. We help you prioritize your projects and create a box around it.
We co-work twice a week for 90 minutes and support you in bringing projects to the finish line. It's not teaching you anything new. It's giving you the structure to focus and create with what you already have.
Because amazing things happen on the other side of finished. Come try it out and see how it feels at theboxcommunity.com. I would assume, too, that that's also one of the things that that you help people with, even with Future and some of the other things that you're doing, is just kind of opening up a different way to think about what you're doing and how to move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I enjoy doing is looking at a problem and seeing like where it breaks and knowing the right things to push or to move around so that it's resolved. So when someone would show me a logo, I'm like, okay, here's the problem with the logo. It's not bold enough, or it's being too cute. You're trying to do too much with it, where it needs to be something that can feel timeless in its design. And the typeface that you chose seems to go this way and evoke this kind of feeling, whereas we want something that's more masculine or more feminine or more elegant. And that's where the mismatch is. I'm able to kind of put my finger on the problem pretty quickly and say, oh, if we just change it, I think this will work. Or oftentimes, is the case with many creative people, they come up with ideas that they can't see the brilliance of their own idea. So they'll do 50 sketches and they're like, oh, I don't know which one to pursue. I'm like, well, that one has a really strong conceptual hook and it seems to be the right solution without trying too hard. Why don't we highlight that one and work on that and take that further? And I don't know what your individual backgrounds are, but when you work with two creative people who have a healthy amount of respect and taste, you can make decisions much faster. You can achieve a result much quicker rather than just toiling on it by yourself, because you lose, I guess, objectivity and you don't know, is this good? Am I solving the problem? Or is this just self-indulgent and me just feeding what it is that I like?
Yeah, I completely agree. I've been in the music business for 40 years. And there was a time when there were people that I really admired who it looked like, and I'm not sure it was actually true, but it looked like they made records all by themselves. They played all the instruments, they did all the stuff. And that was attractive to me in a way, just, the self-contained nature of it. Obviously, I could do it a lot cheaper, all that kind of stuff. But when I would start doing that, I quickly would just run out of gas. I didn't really like it. I couldn't step back and really see, is this any good, or what's the deal? And even now, when I can do whatever I want at my house, but I don't. I have a friend I love to work with at his studio. I go there because he can tell me, yeah, you need to stop now. You're done. That was it. That was the one, or I can say, hey, what do you think about this? And he can give me a great idea that maybe I didn't see, or tell me, you know what? No, you're totally on the right track. So I completely get it. Yeah.
It's crazy how many blind spots we have just in general as humans, but also as creatives, that lack of perspective. In my own experience, I tried to do things alone for a long time. And it wasn't until I brought in new perspectives and eyes and brains for different experiences that could point out things that are now so obvious. So it makes a lot of sense. And you just went straight there. I mean, the difference that I'm seeing with your journey compared to a lot of people nowadays is you didn't go to Fiverr or Upwork or these, online hiring platforms. You said you went to, past previous either coworkers or peers or friends. So I guess that's interesting to me because it's like the importance of networking and getting inside of ecosystems and meeting people and then continuing relationships.
Yeah, I think and it's arguable like what the single biggest value of going to a university is. Some people think it's education. Other people would argue it's the network that you build. And looking back on my own life, almost all the opportunities I got, especially in those formative years, came from those relationships that I didn't even know I was developing. So when I got offered that job to work in the ad agency, it was because a former classmate of mine, Colleen Mathis, who's a copywriter, she was offered the job. She graduated before I did. And they asked her, we need to partner you up with somebody. That's how the agency world works, a copywriter with an art director. And of all the people that she thought of me to recommend. Now, keep in mind, I had 2 classes with Colleen, hadn't seen her probably in 6 months or a year. And I made enough of an impression on her that she's like, I'd like to work with you. Is this something you're interested in? And so, of course, then that leads to the next thing. And there's just countless experiences where, because of the people I met, how I conducted myself and the work that I did and the impression I made on them, that allowed that conversation to continue. So my general advice to young people in university is don't just focus on the work that you're doing, focus also on the relationships that you're building or not building. Because I'll tell you a little story here. And I don't like to go negative, but I will tell you the story because there's a lesson to learn here. When I was in school, I was learning a lot of different things, 2D animation, 3D animation, and to switch between 3D animation and 2D animation was hard for my brain to re-rack. It was very difficult. And so I was struggling using After Effects. And so I asked one of my friends, like, I'm having trouble with the homework. You seem to understand this. Can you help me? And she's like, sure. It'll be $30 an hour. Like, okay, so I've been helping all my classmates for zero. And so this person was like, okay, legitimate. I don't have $30 an hour. I'm a starving student. I'm living off credit card debt. Thank you, but no thanks. So then later on, I graduate. I start my design company. I start getting in the motion design industry, and our company is starting to blow up. We've created a little reputation for ourselves. And guess who comes calling? That same friend from class who wanted to charge their classmate $30 an hour, which is like, I don't have that kind of money. She came asking, hey, do you have any work for me? I just smiled and said, no, I don't think I have anything for you. I'm hiring everybody else in town, but I'm not going to hire you because that's also the kind of relationship you wanted to build with me. Now, I maintain a professional, friendly relationship, but it's not like, why would I do this? Why would I go out of my way to help you now when in that moment when you could have shown a little kindness, compassion, and generosity, that would have been your moment to shine. And I'm the kind of person who carries a favor or a gesture or a gift really far and deep. Like my wife knows this is one of my vulnerabilities, which is when somebody goes out to help me, I return and reciprocate in orders of magnitude greater than what I receive, because that's how I want to balance the scale. So those relationships, we need to think about them.
I think you just touched on truly what I may consider to be the number one reason for, especially for people in young people in creative pursuits, to go to university. And it's something nobody told me when I went. So I left early, and I didn't build a lot of those relationships. Those relationships came from other places. Though years later, I was with a group of students from the college I went to. They were visiting Nashville, and I was taking them around, and one of them asked me, how do I get work after I get out of college? I said, look around you. All the people that are on this trip, they're the people that you're going to work with, and they're the people that are going to get you work. Because who are you going to hire? Somebody you know, right? I'm not going to hire somebody I don't know if I know somebody. That's really great. Chris, do you, I was wondering, because I didn't get super far into it. First of all, the mission for your current venture, Future, is gigantic and huge and awesome. Well, I'm not going to say what it. Why don't you say what it is, just so because I feel
Sure.
like I'm going to say it wrong.
Yeah. The mission of the future is to teach 1 billion people how to make a living doing what they love. And we sometimes say without losing your soul.
Yeah.
But I think that's implied, right? There's no point in doing something if you're going to lose your soul. And that's a complicated way of saying something like, I want to measure my life and my career in really large arcs. And the arc is I haven't made a real impact on people's lives to improve their condition versus where they're at from their existing state to their desired future state. And I want to do it on such a large scale. So this allows me to keep my focus and my thinking, first of all, to be focused, but to keep the thinking big, because otherwise we tend to play small. We will default to what's easier, the easier path, the path more like well-traveled versus like, you know what, this idea is not big enough. I need to keep going there.
Well, this morning it looked like you were up over 31,000. So that's already amazing.
Do you how big goals just completely shift your way of thinking? Like it forces you out of the norm, because if you're going to, if you're going to do something crazy, you have to like typically totally shift the inner workings of who you are and the people around you and how you operate. So yeah, I think while in the past I've kind of scoffed at billion, million, I'm gonna do something just ridiculously huge. Now I understand the kind of like psychology in that, in its ability to force you outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah. I mean, there is the danger to it too, where sometimes you can make a big goal and it can actually kind of squash you, right?
Right.
You have to be in a mindset that allows for that kind of expansiveness, which I assume that you either are, or at least you can keep putting yourself there.
Yeah.
It's a little delusional.
Yes. So there's a couple of things there. Number one is, I think his name is Eric Silva. I may be spacing on his name, but he gave a TED talk. And Eric Silva is like a super handsome, good looking guy who can do like stream of consciousness, like TED level talks just out of the blue. And he's a host for the Discovery Channel too. And so he said that the billionaires of the 21st century is not going to be measured by how much money you have in a bank account, but by the number of lives positively impacted. That's the new billionaire. And it seems to resonate with, especially with these new, these titans of industry now. They don't think in the old way where we need to have all the toys and all the resources. They're thinking much more like on a larger scale. And I think like, yeah, I want to be a billionaire. I want to impact 1 billion people's lives. And to your point, that sometimes when you have this big, hairy, audacious goal, it can be crippling. It can be stifling because it's so big. It's like trying to eat an elephant in one bite. You just can't do it. Or it falls down the trap that Miles was talking about, which is you become delusional. Like you're going to do what? Right? So it requires a certain kind of tenacity, skill set, and drive and focus to be able to say something like that and not have everybody look at you like, are you crazy? And it's wild to me. And so here's the thing I wanted to share with you. Okay, 1 billion people is 1 in 8 people at the current population. That's a lot of freaking people. And you said we're at 31,000. What you're referring to is we have a counter on our website.
Yes.
People actively say, you've impacted my life. I believe in the mission. So they have to give us their email address and register to get a number. Now, there's a lot of other people who've not registered, who've not been to our site. And those are just the people who have. So it's wild to me now that I'm in Ho Chi Minh City, Saigon. I'm staying at a boutique hotel. And my son and I were up in the 5th floor in the gym and we're working out late at night. It's super hot. And there are 2 women that are working there, 2 African-American women. They're partners. And then my son and I were just talking, and then one of them turns to me and is like, hey, are you that person on YouTube? I watch your content. I'm a fan. I'm like, okay. And so we have this whole conversation. They're former military women, right? They're both in the military or former. And I was thinking, how in the world it is that I'm all the way across the globe. I'm in a gym at a weird hour in a weird place, and someone here is going to have been impacted by something we've done. It's pretty wild. And the more that we create content on a more consistent basis, over longer, bigger that influence, that circle of people that we're going to impact who've never gone to the website, who are not going to register, and that's okay. It's pretty wild that when you set your intention and you actually do the work, so it's not delusional and it's not stifling, the kind of impact you can really create.
Powerful. I am really curious because the word content is used so much now, and it's a huge part, I would assume, of your business and brand and how to spread the word, your marketing, right? And you're really good at it. And I don't know if you're aware, there's a podcast out there that I love called "Don't Make Art, Not Content." And so I'm curious, just your thoughts around like how you believe or your definition of content and or the difference between content and art, and how you kind of approach content. Like, how do you create so much content that resonates so deeply with people? Is it just simply getting out there and talking to people? Like, what's your thought process around that?
I think the word art feels really heavy to me, at least the way people understand it. And it can be overwhelming. It's kind of like saying, I want to teach a billion people. I want to make art. Well, is this art? It's artistic, but maybe it's not art. But if we have a different definition of art, then maybe this starts to open up. And the best definition I ever heard was from the Wachowskis. They had just premiered Cloud Atlas. I was at a screener and they were talking, and somebody had asked this question about art, very educated audience. And one of the Wachowskis said, art is an invitation to look at the world from a different point of view. I was like, whoa.
Wow.
That's pretty broad, inclusive, and it seems to tick all the boxes. And so I think that's pretty cool. So for a very long time, people would say, is graphic design art? Graphic design is what I studied. I was like, graphic design is not art. It is artistic, but it's not something where we're doing for ourselves. It's not like we're trying to invite people into our world and our point of view, or to have an emotional connection. Sometimes we can achieve that, so then it becomes like art, but it's not art. And so people would often ask me, Chris, you're an artist. I would correct them. I'm not an artist. I'm a designer. I solve people's problems and they pay me. That's usually how that works. But when I went on this journey of creating content on YouTube, something weird happened to me. So I'm making content. I'm paying for it, right? I have a space, the studio, people to help me. I'm staying up late at night working on graphics and editing and thinking about all these things and spending quite a bit of my own money to make something with no guarantee that any money will return. And then during one of the live streams, I was saying something and somebody during the live stream had commented, hey, you should do this. And maybe I was in a mood that day. And I said, well, I could do that, or maybe you could do that, but I'm not here spending my time and money for you to tell me what to do. Do you understand that? Right? I'm walking away from 6-figure advertising gigs so that I can do this thing. It's in that moment that I realize I'm having a moment because this is my art. I get to make this for me. If you don't like it, don't tune in. No one's forcing you to watch this, but please don't tell me what to do. You can make suggestions, but don't tell me like you should do this, don't do that. Like, no, you do that. You do it. You have a right to make your own content, but you won't. So my relationship with creating content, like the podcast now, is very different because my old self would have argued with you, make art, not content. Like, no, art is too heavy. That's just too big of a thing to try to achieve. But if you look at the way that I look at it now, it's like art and content are the same as long as you do it for you.
Yeah. I love that. Plus, I can totally tie that back to that quote from the Wachowskis. Somebody asked me on a podcast, I was a guest, and they asked me, what do you create? It took me aback for a second. I'm like, wait a minute, what? And they know that I'm a musician. So I said, well, I create music and conversations. Because as a coach, that's what I do. I create conversations in the moment. And if you think about it, just like your content, those things have people look at the world through a different point of view, right? That's the whole point. That's beautiful, man. I love that. Do you think that's what keeps you doing it?
When you say
a
doing
part
it,
of what keeps you doing it?
Can you expand on
creating
doing
content? Yeah.
You know,
And putting it out there.
yeah, there's a couple of things here. There's a cliche, and I didn't understand what the cliche meant, but I do understand it now. That people would say, like, my students have taught me more than I could ever hope to teach them. And it sounds like these are things that we say to like feel good about like what we do and to be humble and all that kind of stuff. But later on, as I'm reading books and talking to coaches and consultants and storytellers, like there's a lot more truth behind that simple expression that we've heard or might have said ourselves. What do you mean your students have taught you more than you can hope to teach them? You're in a position of authority. You're the knowledge center. You're disseminating this information. So it's unequal. But here's the weird thing. In the act of you trying to articulate your thinking, explaining your thought process, your frameworks, and how you decide to do things, you have to unpack your own brain. So we do things on an autonomic level, like, oh, I chose red because it felt right. I don't even think about it, just choose it. Or I move the type around because it's not working because I know it's off balance. But until I have to help students be able to make those kinds of decisions for themselves, I don't really understand how my brain works. And so that process of slowing it down, breaking it apart, chunking it down so that they can understand it, getting whatever result you want them to get, you're learning so much more about yourself. So the students literally don't teach you anything, but in you trying to explain things to them, you learn so much more. And one of the biggest confidence boosters that I've ever had in my life was by becoming a teacher. Because prior to that, I thought, I don't do anything special. I don't even know what it is that I do. But that first year in teaching, it was a rough first year. I learned so much more about myself, and to see the world through their eyes, through that hunger of like, man, we don't care about practicality. We don't care about dogma. We just want to learn and we want to push the envelope. It ignited something in me that I didn't know. And it built, I think, the foundation of my true confidence, something that has never waned since finding it. And I think that's why I do what I do. I create content because I'm still fascinated by trying to help people. I'm learning more about how my brain works. And that feedback that you get where you say something and somebody's like, I don't get that. What did you say? It gives you another shot at articulating it again, or as many times as you need to until that moment happens. So, I explained a financial model, like how to price work in a way that I hadn't explained it before. And the professor and their students had looked at me, and she turned to me, a friend of mine. She's like, Chris, I've never heard that explanation before. That was pretty awesome. Did you just come up with that? I'm like, I've been thinking about it for some time and I've been working on it and explaining it to people. And it seems to make a lot of sense. She goes, it totally makes sense. And so to me, that's the reward. Like, I'm curious about learning, about improving, about self-development. So making content and teaching people, I don't know if there's a better way. If there is, please tell me, because I'll stop teaching.
No, I think you're right. And I love that you touched on bringing process and structure to creativity and art or whatever it is you create. Because I've been thinking about this a lot lately, where when I was younger, songwriting was magic. It's just magic. You sit down and hope something happens, right? And as I've gotten older, I learned a lot more about the craft, but I still, for a long time, and maybe still, didn't really understand my process, right? How do I do this? Other than those times where something happened, and that can happen, something comes through you and blah, there it is. But what about all the other times? And I think a lot of times the thing that would keep me from maybe writing is that I didn't understand my process. How do I do this? And I didn't really even get that there should be a process, right? That actually makes it easier. Do you feel like I'm starting to think that having that process, understanding that process, even as it may change and develop as you do, actually makes creating art or creating whatever it is you create easier. It doesn't get in the way of the whatever that magic is.
I was searching for this quote. It's not the exact quote, but I think it captures the essence. It says, amateurs sit and wait for inspiration. The rest of us get up and go to work. That's a Stephen King quote. But
Beautiful.
It doesn't fully capture my belief. It's like, if we're sitting there and we're not familiar with our own process, we're at the whims of whatever magical forces that happen in the universe, whether it's divine or chemical or spiritual, whatever, that you're going to be able to come up with something. You're going to be able to write your next song, story, make your next movie. But I believe the ones that are not one-hit wonders, the ones like the Beatles or the Stones who can just seemingly, or Elton John, just write whenever they want.
Yes.
It's because
Yes.
I think they're in touch with their process. They know their formula. And the word formula really rubs creative people the wrong way, that our
It does.
process can be formulaic. But if we look at almost everything else that's not us, it seems like there are formulas, and until we understand it, it seems like magical. I don't know about you, but every time I get on to Google and I start typing a few words, like, how does it know the rest of this? I don't even know what words I'm looking for. And it knows this predictive text thing, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wait a minute. How does this work? Well, it's not magic. It's because they created algorithms to predict based on high search volume what most people are looking for. And there's a small percentage that's not going to be right for it, but the vast majority of people, it seems to work. And the better they get at writing the formula, another word for algorithm, and then they win. And they seem to be winning a lot. And so we look at a chef through rigorous training, thousands of hours in the kitchen, understanding ingredients and temperature and ratios of ingredients, has a formula so that they can create a winning dish time and time again. Perfectly cooked steak, perfectly seasoned. The amateur is the one who wings it all the time. It's like, I don't know, it was good last time, but this time I can't seem to make it again. So they have recipes. Literally, they're called recipes so that you, a novice, have a pretty good shot at recreating a masterpiece. You can create that beef dish or whatever, or that gravy that's a secret recipe. You can do that. But creative people don't want to be reined in with formulas, so they would rather wait for inspiration. I'm not for that myself. And for that reason, I think over the course of 25 years now working in a pretty competitive industry, I've not run into those creative roadblocks. I'm rarely ever stuck in a moment where I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do next, because I have my own creative formula.
Yeah. I love that. Did you develop that formula over time? Did you develop that in school? Is it still developing?
Yes, and yes. So there are different formulas for different things. So when I'm in art school, I'm learning about formal design, like what it means to have a balanced layout. So we're dealing with form and structure, rhythm, repetition, consonance, and dissonance, right? And there are formulas, just like in music.
Sure.
And there's a quote there, like, music is in the space between notes. And we understand that when you have too many notes and no space, there's not really music. So it's that timing between the notes that makes it. In formal design, it's the same thing. When you have too many components, too many different textures, it doesn't work. Or if you have not enough difference, it's really boring and it's very bland. So you learn that formula, and that formula is pretty easy to learn. I could learn it in a semester. I've taught it many times. And then there is a conceptual formula when you're able to create a design that there's a other meaning. We get into semiotics where this plus that equals something more. So the juxtaposition of image and text, or text and text, creates a hybrid new meaning, and there's a formula for that. And so when I figured out those formulas, well, guess what? It's a lot easier to hit a home run when you learn the rules of the game and you know how to hold the bat and you know where the ball's coming from. So a lot of people would just poke in the dark and hope that they would hit a conceptual design, but like, no, I know how to get there. I know this isn't it. And, there's still the trouble finding the components, but at least you know that. There's a formula to telling stories with motion graphics over time. There's a formula for main titles. The more you know this, the easier it is to create. I remember one time talking to my students, and I just pulled a number out of my butt. I said there are only really 7 stories that have ever been written, and they're just different versions of the same 7 stories. They're like, how do you know? I'm like, I don't know. I went on the internet later, I searched it. There are literally 7 story types that every story follows under.
Yes.
And that's the way it works. And so now writing those stories become much easier when you just say, which of the 7 stories intrigues you, story formulas, and then change the variables. It's like that over and over again.
Yeah.
Structure provides so
totally
much room for magic, and it took me a while to figure that. I have a lot of things I'd love to ask you, but I think one of the bigger things, let's see if I can formulate this into a good question, which I really appreciate your ability to ask really good questions. So I'm feeling the pressure. So a big part of this podcast is about the mental game. We could talk strategies all day, but that's already out there, I think. And it can be really overwhelming when you get all these strategies thrown at you, tactics, that kind of stuff. The mental game is what I think throws so many people off. I think it's the difference between an amateur and a pro. And I'd love to hear you talk about the mental game and your mental game, meaning like what is the internal dialogue or how has it evolved in your head? And I'd love if you don't mind answering, like what are some of the challenges that you still face today from a internal dialogue, the voices that tell you to stop or that you suck or that you know you're going to fail, imposter syndromes, those kind of things. You still have those?
I don't have them so much anymore. I do have moments where I get excited. Sometimes it's interpreted as fear or anxiety, but it's mostly excitement. I have this debate with some of my friends about what the word confidence means and where true confidence comes from. And I think I looked it up a while ago. So it means something like belief in one's own ability to solve any problem. It's not what you think it means, right? It's like belief in one's own ability to solve any problem. So if I have a formula process that I've relied on for the last 25 plus years, then I don't know. I feel like it can solve any kind of problem. And I'm exaggerating here to prove a point, but like, say somebody asked me to come up with a vaccine for COVID. I know nothing about medicine, how any of this stuff works, but I do know that if you assemble really smart people and you start to define the problem and what solutions look like, and you solicit a number of opinions and you design a framework to test different medicines, there's an approach and you take it and you go and do A/B testing until you get to that point in which you're like, oh, I can do this. Now, I won't be the one who solves it, but I can manage a team of people and hopefully corral the right resources so that we can achieve a certain result. And so there's not a whole lot that I sit there and think, you suck, you're a failure. There are things I know I'm not good at, and I have to make the adult decision, do I want to get good at this or not? Like, I know I'm not good at dancing. I know I cannot sing. I think someday I might learn how to dance, but that's not a priority for me. So I resolve that as I currently am not a good dancer. I could shake my body around a little bit. But other than that, I really cannot dance. And so I think when we come to accept our strengths and our weaknesses, our shortcomings and our skills as one and the same, I think we come to a lot of peace within ourselves. I've been very fortunate that my parents, while raising us, were very busy. We're latchkey kids. And so there wasn't a lot of parental guidance around outside of like weekends and seeing my parents at night at the dinner table. So I left a lot of room for all of us, my brothers and I, to figure out who we want to be in the world. I don't have a lot of inner voices that aren't my own. And I find that a lot of people who've had very loving and sometimes controlling parents have an extra voice or two or three in their head that they're constantly confused as to who their real voice is. So there's this book, I think it's called Conquering Your Inner Critical Voice, written by Dr. Firestone's, I assume husband and wife, and a couple other therapists who do voice work. And the voice work they're talking about is the inner voice, groundbreaking stuff. And to recognize that the voices inside your head aren't your own. There's the critical voice, there's the optimistic voice, and there's your true voice. And finding that apparently for a lot of people is a lifelong endeavor. And for me, it's just, I think I have one voice. I did do a little bit of therapy, learn sometimes like that's not my voice. And I learned this concept from my therapist. And once I figured that out, I'm like, yep, if this voice doesn't serve me, it's not my real voice. And so I don't allow myself to entertain those ideas that you suck, that you're terrible, and that you're a failure. If I don't like something that I've done, I try to feel the intensity of that emotion as deeply as possible, negative or positive, and then to make a resolution within myself not to repeat that. I'll give you an example. This just happened recently on my travels. I have two boys. They're practically adults right now. One is 20, one is 17. And I always tell them, because they're not the best planners of their time, that we're going to check out of the hotel. You need to make sure that you build enough time so that you're done packing. So we're going to be at the counter at a certain time, that you've done a thorough sweep of like not leaving things behind, because they always leave things behind. Always. And I'm like tired of like buying them replacements, right?
Yeah.
Parents know this. So of course we check out of the hotel. I said, everybody, you checked. And everybody's like, good, we're good, Dad. We leave. Later we come to get our luggage and there's an extra bag. I'm like, whose extra bag is this? We checked in 5 items. Why do we have 6 right now? Their housekeeping found stuff you left behind. And so my mind went immediately to like, see, I told you guys, you always forget something. And then my son recognizes his bag and there's stuff in there. He goes, Dad, it's my stuff. And then I have a panic attack because I was thinking, did I forget stuff in the closet as well? Because that's the one place I didn't check. I started inquiring about it. Like, well, whatever they found, they would have put in this bag. So sure enough, my son digs through the bag, mostly his stuff, 2 things that are mine. And he looks at me like, see, Dad, it's not always us who forget. It's you too. We got in the car and I was not feeling happy with myself. To make this story, like to bring it to a point, the reason why I want to tell you this story is I wanted to feel the shame, the guilt of harassing my own children and not following through with myself and not doing a diligent job of checking myself. Not just checking for myself, but checking for the entire family. And so I wanted to sit with that negative feeling for a little bit. And I made a promise to myself, don't make that mistake again. And then be at peace with this. Now, this is an example of a larger philosophical approach I have with how I live my life. So if I do a bad business deal, I'm not going to beat myself up over it for the rest of my life. I should not even beat myself up over it for a month or 2 weeks. I want to feel the pain. I want to feel the negative emotions. I want to make a decision. I want to change my behavior, and I just want to move on. And so once I realize that lesson, I'm grateful for that opportunity. And then I'm at peace.
Well, you also just hit upon maybe the greatest parenting strategy ever in surviving raising children. Is exactly what you just said. Because I have a 12-year-old boy, totally get it. I often find myself in that situation where I've told him, hey, you got to do this, and then I don't do it. So then, wait a minute, that's not going to help anybody, you know? And also like what you just said about allowing yourself to feel that emotion, because that's something that people don't do. You know, they're afraid to do that. It's not conscious, but we tend to push that away, resist that, don't feel it, make it feel better, make it go away, cover it up, do something. And that's huge. That's gigantic. Thank you for illuminating that in the way you did. How much? So I'm going to assume, and tell me if I'm wrong, that right now, future is sort of your main focus or a big part of your main focus in work life. Yes?
Brand Lab.
It's my only focus.
Okay, great.
Yes. I don't do service design work anymore. I used to have 2 companies, one called Blind and The Future. And The Future has many components to it. That can get complicated, but it's my only focus.
I was wondering how much of some of this mindset oriented content people might access in future.
It's an evolution.
Yeah.
I started making content teaching people how to do design work. And then I realized there are a lot of people doing that. I think I need to focus my talent somewhere else. And then I started focusing on business and entrepreneurial skills that I thought creative people need to learn if they want to have a successful business. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that's been the predominant thing that I talk about, whether it's about negotiation, pricing, sales, or marketing, something around that. But then you evolve and you think, and I think, Miles, you talked about this earlier, there's no shortage of tactics out there, how-to, step-by-step. So why are people still stuck? Why aren't they achieving what it is they set out to? Why aren't they living their best lives? And it's because something else is holding them back. And it's a belief system. It's a mindset challenge. And so what we have to do is we have to solve that before they can have the solution. Just a little story here. I was coached by my former business coach for 13 years. He's since passed away. And one of the things he would say to me at first, I was like, I think you're patronizing me a little bit here, or you're just giving me one of these empty platitudes. He would say, like, you're one of the best students I've ever had. Like, okay, I don't even know what that means, whatever. And he would keep saying it. I'm like, I don't believe you, whatever. And then one day I just asked him, like, what does that mean? I'm one of your best students. Like, is that an insult or is that a compliment? I don't even understand it. And what he told me was, you have this rare ability to hear a new idea and just do it. And that shocked me because I'm like, why is that special? Because he's like, when I coach people, and I coach lots of people, sometimes it takes a year of us talking about it before they'll make one change. And his name is Kier. I'm like, Kier, that doesn't make any sense to me. People pay you. Not only is the time valuable, the money they're paying you is valuable, but the result that they're not getting, the opportunity cost, is extremely valuable if they're not going to achieve this. Why would someone hire you not to do what you say? And he said in a very kind and empathetic way, he says, Chris, people just don't work that way. People aren't ready to make the kind of changes the way that you are. And so I know when I'm told to do something, I'm just going to do it. I don't want to spend a lot of time mulling it over. But what I forget then is a lot of people are a different way than the way that I am.
Yes.
So I can give you advice on how to make more money. And I always wondered this because when we make a video, the same literal video goes out onto the internet and is seen by a bunch of different people. And the result vary incredibly, like from somebody who hates me, who calls me a scammer, to someone who's like, I just made $100,000 off you. How could that be? Same video, same voice, same video, same edit, same color. Why is it somebody gets something different from it? It's because their mindset is different. Their willingness to try something that they don't fully comprehend, to put it into action, is the key differentiator. So we always say action is the biggest predictor of outcomes. So a person who's willing to take action, I would be willing to bet almost always will beat the person who's like, let me think about this a little bit more.
Man, and is there one or two things that you do to get rid of the noise? Like for you personally, do you meditate, or would you recommend meditation, journaling, do you have any practices like that to kind of stay at peace?
Good question. I'm going to give this answer under the advisement of my wife, which is, she's like, don't tell people you don't meditate. Just tell them you practice non-traditional meditation.
Yeah.
So that's the correct answer, I believe. I had said to Miles before, where I don't have a lot of noise in my head. I don't have a lot of extra voices. I don't need to calm them or quiet them because I'm pretty clear in my own head. And so I've never gone to meditation. I've not sat down and tried to meditate, whereas I know my wife does it on a daily basis and finds great clarity in it and finds it to be very joyful practice for her to do. I just am alone with my thoughts a lot and just think about it, and then I make these decisions. And usually that seems to work out pretty well for me. So I don't do any kind of traditional meditation at all.
I think the definition of meditation has just completely evolved, or at least for me. I kind of feel the same, where I might not sit down very regularly. I don't really have a meditation practice, but I'll find opportunities where I can sit with something, or journaling is a big outlet for me to just, sit with my own thoughts, or sit with, no thoughts, or let anything come through and practice that. Because sometimes that's the hardest part, because our world is so noisy. And I think that's one of the hardest parts to keeping the voices out of our heads. Is there's just so many voices out there. This is a voice, right? Like, this is a podcast. In a way, we're adding to the noise, and hopefully we're a signal. But I've tried to practice kind of picking, like one or two people, and being able to take that action and go to the finish line instead of jumping from thing to thing, which I think so many people fall victim to.
Yeah, I want to take this moment to share something I've come to learn. There's a TED Talk. There was a Western man who had shaved his head and gone to Asia, I think, to become a monk, to learn how to meditate. And he gave this TED Talk about it. He says most people misunderstand what meditation is. Meditation isn't the purging of all thoughts. It's not to be empty. It's actually to become aware of your own thoughts and feelings. It's not to suppress the thoughts and feelings. It's to become a witness to them. Well, under that definition, I've been meditating most of my life then, because I try to understand what I'm feeling and thinking from an external point of view so I can decide what's going to serve me best in the moment. So I'm not an advocate for being emotionless. I'm an advocate for regulating your emotions when they're beneficial to you. So some of my friends are like, you're a very emotional person, or some say you're cold and calculated. How can I be the same person as interpreted by two different people? And the reason why they might say something like that is when I'm having a moment with my wife or my children, and it's about love or some other very positive emotion, I don't want to hold that back. Like my son, who's 17 years old, still gives me these deep, long hugs for like 3 minutes. And I don't try to push them away. I'm like, let's embrace each other and feel all those emotions. But when I'm experiencing a negative emotion about something, somebody might have wronged me, I'm feeling angry, whatever it is, I'm feeling afraid. I try to understand, like, what am I doing right now? And it's just going to serve me. And if it's not, I just dial the volume down. So it's this ability to witness ourselves. So I think when you talk about like journaling, when you write, you're actually literally able to see yourself writing, to see your thoughts on a piece of paper. I think that's what's happening. And that's why journaling is important, because then now you can literally read back your own thoughts. I just happen to do it without the writing part. I'm just paying attention to what it is I'm thinking and feeling and saying.
Yeah, I mean, I would state it this way, that you have a natural awareness of what's happening inside you. And as a coach and as someone who teaches meditation from time to time, that's really where we're going, is just an awareness. And and it never stops. That's not a game that you just magically win. Oh, I'm totally aware now. You're kind of always practicing it. As you just said, you kind of do it all the time, right? Maybe you don't do it in some formal practice way, but it's become habitual for you. So yeah, you do meditate. You just don't sit on a cushion while you do it, and that's awesome.
In the lotus position.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I can't do that, so I don't do that either. Yeah. I'd get stuck there. You'd never get me out. Mm-hmm. So future is the thing right now. What's next for you and future?
Well, when you say the future is the thing right now, to me, there is no next. It's just the future.
It's just the future.
Yeah, the future is my future. And I look at, like, we all, if we're fortunate to have 3 acts to our career, I'm in the 3rd act. I'm 51. I'm going to be 52 in a couple days. And I don't know what else to do with my life. Most of my physical needs in terms of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs have been met. Like the bottom half of Maslow's pyramid, most of that pyramid is met for me. So now I'm just looking at self-actualization to realize my potential and to teach people on a scale of what I'm talking about is going to be my life's work. And there's so much more work to be done. I've made the dedication or the commitment to myself this year that I'm going to be the best teacher that I can be. So I'm aligning myself and hiring other professors and teachers that I look up to teach me their pedagogical ways, and so that I can expand. And I'm constantly working on different ways of teaching myself so that I can be a more effective teacher. I keep thinking of it like this. If I can learn to speak more clearly by 5%, every video that I make will have that much greater impact by every single human who sees it. So if 100,000 people see it, that'll be 105% or whatever, 100,000, and add that 5% on top of that. And so that's why I'm really working on like workshopping Socratic questions, frameworks and mental models, different stories and facts and figures that I can use at any point in time to help someone get unstuck. So that's what I'm doing.
I love it. We always ask this question, but you answered it in an interview that I read. And I just want to see if it still seems accurate.
Okay.
We always ask people if they consider themselves more of an introvert or an extrovert. And I read that in 2 words to describe yourself was loud introvert.
Yes.
Is that still accurate?
That's very accurate. And
Awesome.
there's some explanation here, right? So everything is never just black and white. It's not binary.
No.
There's a spectrum. And I think I might have been quicker to identify myself as an ambivert because I don't think you can really change that part of you. Why has it changed for me over the years? I think one, being a refugee immigrant coming to America, uncomfortable with English. English is my second language. Being ostracized by a community that didn't accept me, being one of few Asian people within my socioeconomic group, whatever, made me super self-conscious, hyper self-conscious, so that I would remove myself from social functions and different things. So I thought in my own mind I was more antisocial, introverted than I really was. But in private circles with my cousins and my really, really super close friends, I'm a pretty wild, funny guy. So I don't know how to resolve these two parts. There's the goofy person who wants to make people laugh and entertain people. And there's a person who's super reserved, wondering whether they're going to eat lunch by themselves in high school. So I'm working through that. And as I go into adulthood and find some skill sets, I'm starting to open up to this other part where I actually look forward to being around people, that people do sometimes energize me. And the key differentiator here is this: whether I perceive that we know each other or not really regulates my energy. So I think where a true extrovert, doesn't matter if you know them or not, they are energized by being around people. Whereas for me, it's like, if I feel like we know each other, I'm going to be energized. But if I feel like I'm walking into a room of strangers, then I'm going to be depleted. So my trick, and I say this on stage, is I want to make content so good I don't actually have to have social skills. And that's what I'm working with right now. So if my content is good enough, you'll feel like you know me, and you'll walk up to me and say, "Hey, Chris, blah, 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 blah." And I'm like, I don't know you, but I feel like we could be friends. So it makes it a lot easier for me.
Well, I think you're doing it because we just spent an hour together and I feel like I know you. So thank you for that. And I can't thank you enough for spending time with us, really.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank you.
Chris.
Miles and I don't always do very well with discipline, consistency, and grinding our way through the creative process.
We're also tripped up with things like overwhelm, imposter syndrome, perfectionism, and lone wolf syndrome on a weekly basis, and it's not a good feeling.
So a couple years ago, we created The Box to solve our own problem. The Box is a container and community for creatives to stay accountable, do the work, and actually finish what they started. We help you prioritize your projects and create a box around it.
We co-work twice a week for 90 minutes and support you in bringing projects to the finish line. It's not teaching you anything new. It's giving you the structure to focus and create with what you already have.
Because amazing things happen on the other side of finished. Come try it out and see how it feels at theboxcommunity.com. That wraps another episode of The Subtle Art of Not Yelling, your home for creative growth.
If our words have resonated with you, subscribe, share, and leave us a review. It means a lot and helps us reach more creative entrepreneurs.
Join us next week as we continue to explore the art of quietly becoming a creative superpower and thriving without yelling.
Until then, keep nurturing your ideas, honing your craft, and shipping your work.
Because amazing things happen on the other side of finished.